Hello, it's Big Cheds. This is my battles with cancer. This is my story fighting cancer and taking care of my mom when she was fighting cancer, and then learning how to mourn her, how to deal with the loss of a loved one. And I wrote about my experience to help me process what I went through, and also to help other people who are new to those experiences. And that's why this book is free. I've been reading the whole thing for free. I'm almost done. It's on my YouTube at Cheds Trading. You can get it on Amazon if you want, Kindle paperback, and I have an audiobook. You can listen to the Audible. Same for Trading Quotes and Trading Wisdom that I've also previously published. Of course, I'm Big Cheds on Twitter and Cheds Trading on YouTube. So we're at the heart of the summer. We're getting close to the end of the book. We're pretty close. Heart of the summer. We just did perspective, some of the trips I took to try to gain some perspective. So, heart of the summer. Returning from the fishing trip brought me right back into the heart of the summer. With the hot sun beating down overhead, my garden was as thirsty for water as my soul was for healing. Not just parched, but also overgrown was the garden. After watering it, I spent most of the day pulling weeds and trimming back nature where things had grown outside of the boundary lines I had set for them. With dirty hands and tired knees, I completed my task, just in time to take my daughter and wife for an evening swim. The town had a nearby beach that we often visited on hot and sunny days. It was a great place to meet up with friends and to spend time teaching our daughter how to swim. With my wife at work during the day, I would often go there, and I saw other families with 3 generations of beachgoers. And that made me sad that Mom couldn't join us, as she too loved the water so much. At night, I spent time in my man cave, decompressing and working through my emotions while brainstorming ideas for this book. Working on this tome was both an escape and a punishment, but most importantly, it was a necessary tool to work through my emotions so I could gain that perspective I so badly needed. As a way to deal with the pain of losing Mom, I told myself that I needed to travel far and wide to gain some perspective. And so far, neither my trip down south nor my trips to the lake had allowed me to fully disconnect from the pain. Leaving the country was the next logical step in this process. By late summer, my wife's schedule freed up, and it was time to take that trip out of the country. We were both looking forward to spending quality time as a family, enjoying the nice weather while we took in the sights and sounds. The trip was to be split into 2 main sections. The first being a 4-day stay in Montreal, and the second a 3-day stint in Quebec. Our plan for sightseeing was rather ambitious, but we pulled it off nonetheless with great precision. We visited many of the places I had long wanted to, including the Jean Talon Market, Notre Dame Basilica, Botanical Gardens of Old Montreal, and we capped it off with a fireworks display at the Mount Royal Lookout. All throughout our whirlwind sightseeing tour, each time I gazed upon a serene horizon, or feasted my eyes upon a beautiful painting, or I came upon some old stone walkway, I thought about Mom, and I wished that she could have been there with us. This feeling of regret had become a common theme in my life after her passing. That line from the Joni Mitchell song, Yellow Taxi, often came to mind. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? There was no easy answer to this pain and regret that I was feeling, but I hope that time might provide one for me. After breakfast, we left for Quebec and towards the hotel I had booked for us just across the river in a town named Lévis. There was a ferry service that ran every 20 minutes, bringing people back and forth across the massive waterway that separates Lévis and Quebec. After a scenic drive and a brief stop in a town called Trois-Rivières, which means three rivers, we checked in to our new place before making our way over to the ferry port. The ferry ride itself was rather quick, but it still had its own majesty as you could see for miles up and down each side of the expanse. The beautiful stone walls and ancient buildings on the lower side of Quebec calmly greeted us as we approached the shore. Our sightseeing plan for Quebec was much less ambitious than it had been for Montreal, as the city was much smaller and everything seemed to be within walking distance. After disembarking the ferry, we spent a bit of time in Quebec's old city, built in the 17th century. We walked around the narrow cobblestone streets, had some coffee and croissants, and admired the European-style architecture and eclectic storefronts that lined either side of the road. After shop hopping for a little while, we decided to head up to the city via an escalator-type machine called a funicular. The funicular was more or less of a cable car, in this case designed to shuttle about 20 or so passengers between Quebec and the old city. One could walk the distance up as well, but the path was nearly 1,000 steps up a winding trail. And that is what made use of the funicular so convenient. Up top was an expansive boardwalk. It had long wooden planks and green metal benches centered around a pristine black and white stone statue that reached nearly 40 feet tall. All of this in the shadow of the Chateau Frontenac, a sprawling castle that had long ago been converted into a high-end hotel. Opposite the castle was a breathtaking view of the channel, and one could be forgiven for spending hours there just looking out into the distance, or even watching the ferry shuttle back and forth instead of spending time in the city. After taking in the view, we walked around for several more hours, shopping and dining, before heading back to unwind. On day 2, we took the ferry again for a tour of the Citadel. The Citadel is not only a museum, but also an active military fort used by the British. It was built 4 years after the British took Quebec from the French, and it helped them to defend the city after the Americans captured Montreal during the American Revolutionary War. Currently, the Citadel is guarded by the British Royal 22nd Regiment. After completing our tour, we decided to do something fun, and we chartered a horse-drawn carriage ride and tour of the city. Our guide was a gentleman in his late 30s with broad, tattooed arms and a small mustache. He complimented our ride by providing a rich oral history of the city. His personality, accent, and attitude made the experience all the more authentic, and he spoke from the heart. Following the carriage ride, we walked around, and then we had dinner at a nearby restaurant to the shore before taking the ferry ride home to relax ahead of our final day in Quebec. So far, so good on the trip. I was getting the distance I needed from home and from recent events to contemplate my feelings, and my wife and daughter were having a great time exploring somewhere new. With the final day upon us, we opted to skip town so we could visit a massive waterfall and its surrounding park about an hour northeast of the city. We had a great time walking around and people watching and taking pictures of the waterfall, and then soon enough, it was time to go home. On our way out of the city, we decided to stop at a playground so my daughter could have some unstructured free time, and I took that opportunity to partake in a quiet moment of reflection. While my daughter and wife explored the playground, I sat on the edge of a nearby hill and chilled out. Staring at the sky, I paused to feel the wind gently blowing across my face. With most of the trip now behind us, my focus was starting to return to thinking about mom again and wanting to reconnect with her. My emotions were ripe and I wanted to tap into them. So I pulled out my phone and I started to listen to some voicemails. As her voice hit the air and entered my ears, it was as if I could breathe again. I began talking back to her while listening, which, of course, seemed completely natural to me. Over the next 10 minutes, I played one voicemail after another, talking back and forth with Mom, almost as if I were having a conversation with her. And though I knew this act meant that I was giving in completely to my emotions, it felt good to do so. And I decided that I should repeat the task when I was missing her badly. The drive back from Quebec was a breeze, and now with just a few weeks left in the summer, it was time to continue going through Mom's house, helping to clean up, but also looking for things I could use at my place, especially the gardening tools for which Mom had plenty. It was also important for me to spend time there just bonding and just being with myself and with Mom's energy. That place was sacred and where I had felt the most connected to her over the years. In the midst of this process, I became caught up in the moment, caught up in the emotion, and I screamed out, "Mama!" My knees on the grass, arms stretched outward and head looking up to the sky, in the place where I felt Mom's spirit the most, our beautiful backyard that had in many ways defined my childhood. I lost control and let out all of my emotions at once. What triggered these emotions was the knowledge that Mom's house would soon be sold and I would no longer be able to come back there and connect with her and bathe in warm remembrances of my youth. Shortly after returning home from her place, I received a call from my stepmother, and I was immediately worried that something happened to Dad. She almost never calls me directly. My heart rate returned to normal when I found out that she just wanted to update me on his status after a long-planned knee surgery. Once we hung up, I thought long and hard about why I had reacted to her phone call that way. Had I been conditioned to expect disaster and personal tragedy after losing Mom? Was I just waiting for the other shoe to drop? There was no doubt that the pain of losing Mom had changed me. I was feeling vulnerable without the person who was so foundationally important to my life. Working on this book did help with those feelings, and with great effort, I continued to make progress, writing, editing, and rewriting whenever I had the chance. With merely weeks to go until Mom's house was to be sold, I took one final trip back there to grab some items I had previously set aside. Going back there was always an emotional affair, illustrated by the fact that the last time had brought me to my knees with grief, and I was hoping to avoid a repeat of that experience. One thing for sure was that Mom had a great selection of gardening tools and outdoor equipment, and I gladly grabbed those items. And as I was doing so, I noticed several flagstones laying by a tree. Growing up, Mom always had those stones laying around her garden or lining some path around the yard. And even though I was not sure what I was going to do with them, I loaded a dozen or so into the trunk of my car. I also took several medium-sized field stones, thinking that it would be nice to add them to my fire pit. I believed that every little piece of nature I brought with me was a piece of Mom that I could save. My heart was mixed with anger, guilt, sorrow, and yearning for Mom. I wanted to look for the signs to know that she was with me, but because I was so angry and pessimistic, I was closed off emotionally to that type of experience. In the midst of this internal conflict, I kept coming back to a central theme that I needed to figure out what to do with my life. After all, I was still incredibly blessed and I had so many great opportunities in front of me. Rather than letting mom's passing define me in a negative way, I hoped that I could use it to add purpose and to take control of my destiny. Now I knew how short and precious life really is. Of all the many things I wanted to do going forward, they were all prefaced with, after I finished the book, which just underlined how important a project this cancer memoir was to me. During the day, I worked on this book, did stock chart analysis, and continued to go through our belongings. And at night, I spent time communing with nature at the fire pit with some field stones from Mom's house and plenty for mine. Pardon me. I used that large fire pit to burn the extra brush I had cut down, but also to enjoy the majesty of a good blaze from time to time. As my mind wandered, as it often does by the fire, I kept struggling to understand the concept of Mom not being alive. Listening to voicemails brought her back to life at a moment's notice. It was merely months ago that she was with us and handling her chemotherapy so well. So I continued to struggle with accepting the finality of her passing. Soon enough, Mom's house was set to close and a cleaning crew was preparing to empty it out. Driving there for what was most likely my final visit, I was incredibly emotional. I expressed that sentiment by talking to Mom and telling her how much I missed her and how sorry I was that her house had to be sold. I also told her how proud I was of the job she did raising my siblings and I, and that because of her hard work, we were all well prepared for life. Thank you, Mom. I anticipated that the house closing would bring me some closure, as going there after Mom's passing had helped me to keep alive the fantasy in my mind that Mom was still okay, evidenced by my calling her name out every time I opened the front door. As I arrived, I counted 5 trucks parked along the street and a 30-yard dumpster in the driveway. Young men in their late 20s were hauling trash out of the house and into the dumpster, with the larger items being tossed into the trucks. Quickly scouting out the house, I counted nearly 8 men working at a breakneck speed to empty the place. Entering the house now and looking down at the dusty floor where a bed used to be, I realized that each of these rooms that held so many memories for me were just that, rooms. After taking one last look at the house and a few pictures for posterity, I left, bringing with me a few more flagstones and many memories of a great time growing up. Weeks later, with the sale of Mom's house behind me, I took a quiet moment again by the fire, enjoying the night sky and thinking about life and the process of losing someone you love. There was a full moon that evening, and as the fire flickered a magnificent blend of red, orange, and yellow, I wondered, does Mom hear me if I call out to her? With the logical side of my mind battling the more creative side, I continued to ponder, if so, what is she doing? Just sitting around and waiting for me to call out her name? Toiling with the concept of eternity in the afterlife, I pondered if perhaps after people pass, they stay around in some type of a transitional phase until everyone they knew when they were alive had passed. Then and only then can their spirit rest. These were all queries without a clear answer, but the process of asking them reflected the fact that I was trying to make sense of my new reality. Weeks later, it was time for that 3-month checkup with the oncologist, and I was looking forward to this meeting so I could make sure that everything was good with my health. These appointments have been somewhat of a backstop for me, as they reminded me to live a healthier life, and they were an opportunity for the doctors to make sure that nothing slipped through the cracks. This 3-month checkup was with the nurse practitioner. After she performed her examination and told me that everything looked good, we took a little time to catch up on my life. As a point of reflection, we talked more about the 2-year post-treatment benchmark that was coming up and how I was looking forward to reaching it so I could breathe a little bit easier. Though everything looked good so far and I was healthy, I was still conflicted emotionally, and I told her that I would not be able to let my guard down until I had made it a full 2 years. That was a sentiment that she completely understood. We talked about my work on this cancer memoir, and I told her that I had really been stepping up my progress lately, and I just could not wait to get it over with. At that point, I was heading into the hardest part, Mom's time in the hospital at the end. And boy, that is the hardest part and has been the hardest part of editing, is going over it over and over. Wanting to end the appointment on a positive note, I told her that I was excited about some upcoming trips to the symphony I had planned, including one with my daughter, which would be her first time. The gift. This is an interesting chapter. We're getting right towards the end. This is my story. This is my battles with cancer, a patient and caregiver's candid memoir. I am a cancer survivor. I was a patient. I was a caregiver taking care of my mother, and I've been mourning her death. I'm still mourning her death, and pardon me. I write about that process in this book as a way to help people. So I'm making this whole book for free. I have a few chapters left, and then it will be there, and I'm proud of that. I'm looking forward to it. You can get it if you like on Amazon, Kindle, paperback, and audiobook. I really want it to be free to everybody. Pardon me. My other chapters, my other titles, Trading Quotes and Trading Wisdom, are also available on Amazon. I'm, of course, Big Cheds on Twitter and Cheds Trading on YouTube. And folks, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I will be back with another chapter soon. Take care. Thank you so much.